Good afternoon, Tom. Thank you for being here for another session of Tom Campbell Answers Your Questions. Today, I'd like to talk about communication. This subject came up in one of our events, and it seems to be more difficult these days to communicate, even with all the advantages of our technology age and instant communication. Have we lost meaning in communication? And what things should be the basis of communication? We have to get on this trajectory of sorting things out and getting facts straight. I researched the advice of experts in the fields of communication and philosophy and leadership and happiness. A friend and professor of communications with a background in philosophy states, what do we know? Where are we getting our information? We need a basis of fact to begin a discussion and form the analysis. How do we mine those facts? Her advice is know your source, do your best to root out opinion from fact, and gather a reliable source. Those things are key. In addition to listening with an unbiased ear, finding a reliable source of information that can hold up to a wide range of agreement, and to note, in the past, I don't know if you remember this, the general policy of news sources was to correct the errata immediately. Local newspapers would even offer small cash prizes for those who could spot mistakes and things like that. Reliability should be the basis for opinion. Without reliable sources of information, damage results, which is always unsustainable. Can you comment on that so far?
Yes, I can comment on
Okay.
that. It was interesting you asked that because the last time I did an interview, I started with the exact same question. So this evidently is a question that's on a lot of people's minds. First, we have to understand a little bit about, the low quality of consciousness of the average, human, and understand a little bit about the way that human perceives the world. And then I want to talk a little bit about what's changed today. If we look back, we'll say, well, 60, 70 years ago, we didn't have this problem, and we have it now. So what's the driver? Well, first, let's just talk about us and how we see the world. Okay, we get a data stream and we interpret that data stream, and that interpretation is our reality. Period. It's our reality. Everybody gets a data stream, and their interpretation is their reality. Okay, there's no way to fact check that reality. You get a data stream, and that's your reality. Now, we all then have our independent viewpoints based on how we do that interpretation. This is a multiplayer game here in our physical universe, the virtual reality we call our physical universe. So it's a multiplayer game, and we share things like we all agree that, this is a table, that's a wall, and so on, because it's a multiplayer game. But as far as how we interpret the meaning and significance of things is determined by how self-centered we are, how grown up we are. If you work from fear primarily, then you're going to be self-centered because fear is all about self. If you work from love, you're not going to be self-centered because love is about others. So that's a basic dichotomy between those two. So if you are not so grown up and you kind of work on a basis of fear, you believe that what you believe is fact. If you believe it in your mind, that's a fact. So if you believe that the moon is made of green cheese, then that's a fact for you. And you treat it as a fact. You don't treat it as an opinion or an assessment or a possibility. You treat it as a fact. So that's one thing. So different people have different sets of facts because they have different sets of beliefs. Now, on top of that, we have this problem if we have a low quality of consciousness, and most of us do. That's the standard state. I'm not saying that it's the bottom end of the of the human spectrum we're talking about. We're talking about most everybody here. For a few very evolved gurus, perhaps, will say that they're at least in high school or maybe start in college, but most of us aren't there yet in that quality of consciousness evolution. So I'm talking about the large, the fat part of the curve, the largest number of people, the average person. Okay, so when we're self-centered, the way we interpret the data is in terms of ourselves. Somebody does something, and we interpret that in terms of how does that suit us? How does that work for us? Do we like that or we don't like it? If it suits us and we like it, then whatever was done is correct and right. If we don't like it and it annoys us or bothers us, then what they're doing is wrong. So our right and wrong is decided in our minds about whether it's good for us or not so good for us. Good for us, it's right. Not so good for us, it's wrong. And that's the way we look at relationships. This is about relationships. So if you have a situation where somebody does something you don't like, let's say it's your husband throws his dirty socks on the floor and his dirty underwear, he won't put them in the clothes basket. He just drops them on the floor wherever they happen to land, and that annoys you. Okay, well then your husband is wrong. He shouldn't do that. See? So that's the way we determine right and wrong. So it's an ego issue. So that's one thing. So we have that going on, and that's been a problem long before the internet showed up to confuse us even more, which is where we are today. So we had that in relationships, communications, where people each judge other people according to what they want, what they wish, and what's good for them. So that's problematic already. And that whatever it is you believe becomes a fact for you. Now, again, talking about the average person. Now, that has been with us for a long, long time. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We have different worldviews. We value different things. We have different needs. And that runs into trouble with people, because if a man sees something about his wife or his mate that he doesn't like, then she's wrong. She should stop doing that. It's not the right way to do it. It's not the best way to do it. And vice versa. You see, the problem is if you lead with your ego and your beliefs, which become your facts, turn into right and wrong, then there's this problem in communications. It's just really difficult to communicate with that situation. So now that's a fundamental problem. But then let's move up to the problem we have today and realize that the people who run social media are people who run corporations. And corporations all over are all about bottom line profits. That's what they are in business for, is to make money. The way the internet creates wealth is that it's free for the most part to most people most of the time, but there are advertisers that will throw little ads and things up in front of you to hope to catch your attention and make a sale. Every time somebody clicks on one of those ads, the person that put that ad up has to pay the social media some money. Money is earned by creating clicks. So if you own a social media, then you want people to click more. Well, how do you get people to click more? You get them to click more by engaging them emotionally. And that's the easiest way to engage them emotionally. Make them upset, make them angry, make them feel energized. They want to go do something about that. They want to find out about that. So the media, these social media, they have programmed their media such that they know your likes and dislikes. They know what you do and don't do. And they will then target you for media that will upset you and cause you to be angry. Because then when you're angry, how dare they do that? Now you got to follow that story and see who did what and click, 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 click. And every click is a little money in their pocket. So they don't want people to, oh, I'm done with this. I'm done with this story. I'll go do something else and stop clicking. So the way they earn money is by creating and playing off people's fears. Because if you know what makes people fearful, then you can feed them that and they'll click and click and click because you've engaged them emotionally in what's going on. And they'll come back tomorrow and click, click, click. And they'll tell their friends who will go click, click, click. So social media has driven us to experience things that upset us, annoy us, surprise us, things that are sensational to grab our attention because that makes us click more. They make more money. So that's what's been going on. So before, you had different people with different viewpoints, but they were never manipulated like this before. So you will be fed a bunch of stories and things that will get you to click more and more. And the system knows, the information system knows what will get you to click. The things you like. Are you interested in buying hair products? Well, it'll start sending hair product ads to you. Whatever it can do to get you to click more, it will do that. So it'll send you things you like, and it'll send you things that annoy you and upset you, because that will also get you to click. So that's what's happened. Now, it's kind of a perfect storm. So we have people who are self-centered and tend to jump to conclusions. Okay, people get angry easily. It's the same part of that, fear-based thinking. Is that you're quick to anger and quick to accuse, quick to judge. So all of those things are triggered by the social media. Then what happens is that they kind of run out of things to say, right? You've heard the 24-hour news. Well, there's not that much real news in 24 hours, so they have to make stuff up in order to make it sound like news. And everything then becomes sensationalized. It's reported in such a way to be sensational, grab your attention, and hopefully get you upset a little bit or annoyed so that you'll click. So we have a lot of fake news or misinformation sent into the system to stir people up, to be sensational, which gets more clicks. If you have a story about, oh, man went home, walked his dog, and, they had a great time and everybody lived happily ever after, that's not going to cause anybody to click. Oh, a man went out to walk his dog and, the dog, bit him in the leg and sent him into the hospital, and, we don't know whether he'll live or die, that sort of thing. Then people will click on that and they'll send it around and it will be sensational. We used to think that when we checked out at the grocery store that those, what were they called, National Enquirer and other, grocery store lines, we used to laugh at those, three-headed alien, discovered in Minnesota under a snowdrift. You'd see these things and, everybody realized that, that was just stuff they were making up. It was this sensationalism. Well, almost all our news and I guess news, but also talk and everything else has degenerated to sensationalism because that causes clicks. that causes papers to sell. If you can put a sensational story out there, then you'll sell a lot more papers. You'll get a lot more clicks. More money changes hands. So that's where we are now. So we have been manipulated by social media to make a lot of money for them at the cost of creating a huge amount of chaos in our culture.
I have a point that's to address the social media problem. That's from a Harvard professor. But I'd like to go back to what your beginning statement was. What you believe is true. Is that always the case? Because I feel that these days everything is so topsy-turvy, so convoluted that I don't think what is being perpetrated is belief in what is true. But when you said what you want is what you believe, that rang a little more true. What is wanted is what you have to believe in order to go ahead. Could you distinguish between those?
That's true as well. But I didn't say that what you believe is true. I said what you believe is true for you. It's not true. It's just you believe it. And now there's lots of reasons for you to believe something. So, if you once you
I don't
believe
know.
it, it
I would
becomes true for
question
you.
that. I would question what you believe is true for you. I still would question that because I know that there are highly intelligent people who are presenting their views as though they believe it, but it is unlikely that they actually do believe it. However, what they want is another question, another another thing that could factor into how they need to believe it.
Now you're talking about what I've called misinformation. If they believe something's true, but they say something else because they're trying to manipulate something, that falls under my category of misinformation. And that, of course, that happens too. But where I was going with this is that we have in our culture now a lot of pot stirrers who just like to stir the pot and cause a lot of chaos and dissension because it makes more money. It's a moneymaker to do that. And we have a lot of people who are easily convinced to believe this or believe that. And when they are easily, they're not that hard to convince because you've engaged them emotionally. And when you're engaged emotionally, you're much more likely to believe this and not believe that. That's part of the emotional part. Emotions are not rational. Emotions are feelings. So it's easier to manipulate people when you're dealing with them emotionally. You give them material that connects them with their emotions. Then you lead them to where you want them to be. And they then, that becomes their belief and that becomes their reality. Now, the idea that there's some center point, some place that we can all agree on, that we can somehow converge to a set of ideas, that's probably never going to happen. Because if you say anything, there'll be somebody else who will say the opposite, just because argument makes clicks. Agreement doesn't make clicks. Argument does. So you're going to find people who will argue with anything because arguing is more profitable and because they have a lot of beliefs, which makes them more, narrow-minded, because they have narrow focus, because they have a lot of beliefs. So if you put all this in a pot and stir it, you have a lot of dysfunction going on. And as long as we have the social media that we have, and as long as stirring that pot and creating dissension and division and argumentation is profitable, then we're probably going to have this problem. So we need to solve it at the root. And it's got two roots. One is that low quality of consciousness in general in the population. And secondly, we have professionals who are very well versed in how to stir the pot, how to create dissension, how to create argument, how to play both sides at once. So you tell side A, oh, those side B people are awful. And then you tell side B, those A people are awful. And then watch the clicks come in. So that is what's going on. And yes, misinformation is a very important part of that. You say things and to manipulate people to act the way you want them to act, which for the social media, it's make clicks. For politicians, it's to agree with them. So it's this idea you said that find a source that you trust. Well, that's harder and harder these days, but there
Yes.
are some sources that are better. But guess what? The source you trust is the source that agrees with you. So if you are, have your beliefs all about A and you think A is wonderful, then you will trust the source that tells you that mirrors that back to you. There's another source that says the opposite, and the people that believe the opposite will trust that source. So finding a source that you trust isn't necessarily on the way to solving the problem. That's that doesn't work. Finding common ground also doesn't work.
I don't know. Yeah, I think you have to look for, according to this communication source, you have to look for the most reliable information you can get that is most widely agreed upon. And I think this person also agreed that it is extremely difficult these days. Let me take this for a moment to philosophy.
Yeah.
Let's go way
I
back.
would argue with extremely difficult. I'd say that's impossible, and getting more impossible. So I don't
Yeah,
think you can.
it's
You get this source that that seems best to you. Well, that's
yeah,
very very biased. What seems best to you, and believe
yeah.
that source and do your homework. But the sources of the information are way too complicated for us to know. What, you go back 200 years, you lived in a small town, there was 200 people in the town, you knew everybody's name, you knew all their children's names, and just talking to each other, you kind of knew what was going on with everybody all the time. And you could judge reliability from non-reliability. Now the information is coming from all over the globe. This person says this person says, were you there? Did you listen to those people? Of course not. It's all over the globe. They're in France, they're in Russia, they're in Germany, they're all over. You weren't there. You didn't hear any of that. And the person who actually publishes that is trying to sensationalize it to get you to buy more papers.
That's
So
exactly the problem these days.
it's an impossible thing. You can't say, well, I'm going to find a really good source and most of the people agree with that. Well, most of the people that agree with me agree with that. And all the people that disagree with me disagree with that. And you can count numbers and see how many are on each side. And if the majority of people say it's this way, it doesn't make it this way. It just means that more people believe that than believe the opposite.
Let's go back a bit to Plato. Plato's Republic centers on, is it better to be just than unjust? The arguments presented and the sources, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, conclude conflicting interests in society can be in harmony. Perhaps with these aforementioned protocols, Plato, as an idealist, had the concept that, of course, he wasn't in a technology age, so that might have something to do with it, that there could be a way around it. And I think I'm going to later present a few other things. I ran across this person who's a Harvard professor, Arthur C. Brooks. He's a professor at the Harvard Business School, where he teaches courses on leadership and happiness. And one of his statements is there is lots of activism these days versus intellectual inquiry. There are people who still think that this kind of delving into the facts and the intellectual inquiry is a possibility. Is this a learning moment in these times to open up intellectually? How do we improve? I would also ask, how do we find a common ground? And you mentioned that's extremely difficult. From the communication viewpoint, suggestions on better communication, like what can we do, was the question I posed to this communications professor. Identify with the person you're communicating with, listen in a relatable way, sympathetic to their viewpoint, always know we are more similar than dissimilar, be the example that disproves the dysfunctional approaches to society, have character, goodwill, credibility, and a willingness to pursue the best path you can. I know this is some of your advice. Be that example. Her final words on this subject were poignant. I didn't expect this. Work with heart, care about people. That's like a natural MBT theory. And
Sure.
and I know that's your philosophy
Mhm.
for individuals to carry on and to be
Mhm.
steadfast in their seeking, the
Yeah,
correct information.
sure. Well, I agree with that, and I hadn't got to that yet, but that was going to be my only solution. But if you take all of those and add them together, what you have is grow up, increase the quality of your consciousness, get rid of your fears, get rid of your ego, get rid of your beliefs. Yes, if you do all those things, you'll be a kind, generous, gentle, caring person, and it'll be about others, not about yourself. So, yes, that is the solution, is that we need to grow up. And isn't it strange that when we look at our problems, we find that this solution solves all of our problems? Not only our communication problems, but our personal problems, our relationship problems, and everything else. But it's not something that's going to happen real quickly. Growing up is something everybody has to do from the inside. It's not an intellectual process. You can't say, well, here, let me explain to you how to grow up. Everybody just follows these directions, they'll be grown up. It's not an intellectual thing. You have to change who you are. We're not talking about acting better, acting kind, acting caring. We're talking about being kind and being caring. That's totally different than acting. So a person actually has to change who they are. At the being level, they have to be a kinder, gentler, more caring person. So yes, that is the the only long-term solution for this. The idea that that you try to determine what the facts are. Well, yes, everybody should try to determine what the facts are, but it's too complex now. We don't live in Plato's time. We don't live in a time where Plato probably knew all the people in his circle, all the philosophers, everybody who was anybody, all the politicians. He probably was personally acquainted with them on a first name basis. Well, okay. And it is possible in that small club to come to agreements on things, to find a truth that people agree on. Okay, so that's in that small space, you can do that. Plato didn't live at a time where our information comes from thousands, tens of thousands of miles away. There's no way to verify it. You cannot verify that reporter told it exactly the way it happened, or did that reporter tell it in the way he would like to have it, or the way that would sell more papers, or the way he interpreted it. Well, it's all those things. So what's the fact? Well, if you want to know the facts, you have to go there and watch it. And then it's your experience, and then it becomes your fact. But you may actually misinterpret it too, because you don't know everything about the players, the words they use, what they intended, what they said and how you interpret what they said, but you don't know what they actually meant because you just heard the words. You don't know really how the other people there took those words or how they interpreted those words. So even if you're there, you don't really know what happened. You see? So this idea about, well, find the facts, you get a good source, and so on, all that does is say retreat into your own bubble. And you can't dig out the facts in a complex world where stuff comes not from around the corner and from the people you know, but from strangers you've never heard of and never heard of you, and where the primary ethic is making more money. And I think of control, power, and force. So it's not just difficult to do, it's impossible to do in our current situation. So what we need to do is just what that last person said. We need to realize that, all right, there, we're all here, all of us humans, all 9 billion of us, we're all here doing the best we can with what we've got. Okay, now, some people are more grown up than others. Some people are more caring and more loving, and some people are, more greedy and violent than others. So you have to accept that that's the way it is. Now, that means that you see people or a whole group of people who are doing things that you think are dysfunctional. Instead of getting angry at them, you may try to talk to them, but not in anger. Talk to them out of caring. Because if you talk to them in anger and shake your fist at them and tell them that they're stupid, you'll just push them more deeply into their own beliefs. So you need to realize that that is just the way we are. We human beings make the world that we live in by our choices, by the things we choose to do and choose not to do, by the way we interpret the information, what we believe, what our egos tell us, what our fears are. That's how we interpret the world. And if there's a bunch of people who are interpreting in a way that you think is awful and it's going to lead all of us to hell in a handbasket, then there's nothing you can really do about that. You just have to realize that people are who people are. And if the majority of us drags the rest of us through a really bad time, then we'll just have to deal with that really bad time. The idea of, well, I know how to solve that. Let's go out and kill everybody that disagrees with us. Well, that's not a good solution. You have to let people be. They have free will. They can make poor choices as well as good choices. And you yourself, all of us, are biased in the sense of we listen to the news that says what we believe. And so are the people we disagree with. They listen to the news that says what they believe. And news isn't news anymore. It's stuff people make up in order to get you emotionally connected. It's not really the news. It's, well, how do I spin this so that it spins the most number of people up? So you get news that's been running through a filter of how can I report this news in a way to make more money? And that's what we get. And it's impossible to be there everywhere to see it firsthand. And you don't have any choice but to listen to what you get fed from the sources that you think are legitimate and just trying to give you the news.
News isn't news anymore. You're right. And at the end of the conversation I had with the communications professor, also with a background in philosophy, she conceded this. She conceded that these are going to be difficult times. And as you say, it will take a while. But in the meantime, engage the best way you can. Let me go on to Professor Brooks on happiness. Brooks asks, why are the youth of America so unhappy? Is it the inability to answer the question, what is the meaning of my life? Which brings us to the question that Professor Brooks had, how do we define purpose? I would suggest your theory, Tom, because your theory, you've always questioned the nature of reality as a physicist. You're a scientist. By the very meaning of the word scientist, you want to know. Your theory is logically derived. You use a computer analogy for the nature of reality. This is why the intellectuals, the engineers, IT specialists, and such can easily grasp the concepts. How can your theory complement what Professor Brooks asks about the meaning of life?
Okay, well, that's a good question, and I think I have a good answer for that. How people come up with a meaning to life, and there is a meaning to life. There is a purpose out there. And if you go to my website or if you read my books, you'll find out what that purpose is. The purpose is to become love. It's to lower the entropy of your consciousness. It's to be caring and sharing and compassionate, etc. That is the direction in which consciousness evolves. And there's good science behind that. That's not just a feel-good idea. That is scientifically derived in my theory that it's like that. But now, let's look at where these philosophies come from. Our culture has in it beliefs. I call those in my book cultural beliefs, just things you believe because you're in a particular culture. A culture is basically a shared mind space. It's a collective consciousness within a group. And you have the culture of that group. Okay, now our culture and most cultures all around the world have a belief in materialism in their culture, that this material world is what reality is all about. We have this physical universe and that's it. So if you believe that, then there's an ethic that goes with materialism. And that ethic is that the material world and all the other people out there, which is basically everything and everybody but you, they're out there to be used. They're out there. You can make of them whatever you wish. So you grab what you can grab, you manipulate what you can manipulate, you fight to keep it, and you join with others that help you keep it, and you help them keep theirs, and so on. And that ethic of materialism is basically control, power, force. You have to grab your share of resources, your share of workers, your share of whatever. You control what you can control. If you got to control things, then you need power. You need force. Control, power, force is the ethic of materialism. Materialism comes in almost as a fundamental belief in almost all of our cultures. That's why we are not all that grown up. We have a fairly low quality of consciousness, because with that as the fundamental ethic in our culture, in most all of our cultures, then control, power, force is what you get. Everybody wants more control. They want more power. They want to be able to exert force. And how do you get control, power, force? Well, in our culture, it's through money. That's how you get control, power, and force. So that makes money the purpose. Pretty much is to get as much of it as you can. So that gives you control, power, and force. And that's what people think is important and needs to do. And that becomes kind of the purpose of life, is to get as much money as you can. Well, that's a terrible purpose. Control, power, force creates nothing but chaos and havoc and dysfunction. And a lot of 90% of the people have control of like 3% of the resources. And the other 97% of the resources are the top 1% of the population. So you get that kind of thing with control, power, force. Now, the other side, my model, basically, the point is to lower the entropy of your consciousness. That's to become love, to get rid of your fear, get rid of your ego, get rid of your beliefs, care about others, be kind, be courteous, be helpful. Not what can I get, what's in it for me, but how can I help is the way you go through life. Well, when you do that, you optimize relationships, you optimize social systems. And there, the ethic is love, caring. You see, now, if you have an ethic of love and caring and sharing, then this world would be a totally different place if that were our cultural ethic. But it isn't. It's control, power, and force is our cultural ethics. So that's why we're in this mess that we're in right now. We would be a lot more grown up if we had let go of materialism, say in the early 1920s, when quantum physics said for sure that materialism is not right. At the base of reality is not little tiny particles and chunks of mass, it's probability. Materialism doesn't work. Well, at that point, we should have jumped ship from gotten rejected and ejected materialism and started looking for a different ethic for our cultures to be based on. So anyway, that's the solution. That's the problem. And as long as we have materialism and control, power, force as the organizing ethic of our cultures, of our civilization, then we're going to have basically what we've got now. It's been that way for the 200,000 years that Homo sapiens have been walking on the planet, it's been control power force all the way. The last 500 years, we've done better. The last 200 years, we've done even better more quickly. And it can get better and better. We just need to change our understanding of the nature of our reality. And that's what my model's all about, trying to help people see that reality is not about the stuff. It's about relationship and caring and connecting. That is what reality is all about. So that, of course, is the solution, just as that person said, kindness, caring, sharing. And the way you do that in a tumultuous place like we have here on this planet now is you have to let people be who they are. If you show them that, then you're being a good example and you're not adding to the problem. If you get angry at them, you're adding to the problem. If you get violent with them, you're adding to the problem. So you just have to say, that's the way we are. Offer kindness instead of fighting, and you will change it much more quickly than if you expect to wrestle it to the ground, beat it to a pulp, and get rid of it. I know we're going to change all those people. That will take a very, very long time. If you can convert all those people to a kinder, gentler existence, because everybody's fed up with the way things are here, with the dysfunction that's everywhere. Dysfunction in our institutions, dysfunction in our governments, control power forces. What's in it for me? And how can I get as much as I can? And I really don't care about anybody else because they can take care of themselves. I'm taking care of number one.
Try to be relatable to them, as one of the suggestions was. Well, on the subject of growth, Professor Brooks says, where is the opportunity for growth in these times? And how can we gain knowledge that brings true happiness? He quotes the 14th Dalai Lama in his TED Talk, The Art and Science of Happiness. We need to learn how to want what we have, not to have what we want, in order to get stable and steady happiness. Among the important things in life, Brooke mentions friends and meaningful work, not fame, power, or money, as you've stated. Mm-hmm. Many of your MBT communities evidence of these qualities. Our gathering of your community recently was a true example of friends doing meaningful work. These things speak to your concept of love is the answer, as you have concluded in your theory. This concept is your philosophy through evidence of how our reality works in harmony, as you have stated too. Going to the social media thing, coining the phrase the doom loop of social media in his Meet the Press interview, Professor Brooks references the meaning of life and the lack of a strong sense of this age-old query, and points to the issues of technology, the time spent online. Is it a substitute for your life or an addition to it? And why are you using it? It's a question. So this is speaking to delving for that purpose, looking inside for that purpose. Your Cusack physics experiments will lead to evidence of our purpose. Can you elaborate more on that in light of these comments?
Well, yeah, I agree with most of that. Happiness cannot be a destination. If you're going after happiness, well, if I had enough control, power, and force, I'd be happy. No, you wouldn't be happy. You might be rich, you might be poor, but you're not going to be happy. Happiness isn't a thing that you grab and own. Happiness is the consequence of a life well lived. It's a consequence of the quality with which you treat others and yourself, for that matter. So that's how one finds happiness. If you are kind and considerate and caring, you will find happiness. And it doesn't matter if you get things returned to you. It doesn't matter that you get as much as you give. That's the ego. That's the fear. Oh, what if I don't get as much as I give? Then I'll just be used. That's all fear. If you just are caring, you'll find happiness. Happiness will come to you. And you'll find most of the problems were problems you created for yourself. So happiness is the product, it's kind of the side product of living a good quality life. That's how you find happiness. Now, as far as the science goes, I have not been talking about these things in terms of philosophy, that this is a MBT belief system or something. This is science. If you understand the nature of our reality, what is our reality and how does it work? Why does it work that way? If you understand that, then very clearly the science will show you what the purpose of your life is, where happiness lies, and how to get there. It all falls out as scientific fact, not philosophical, musings. So that's a difference here. There have been lots of people who've said, the purpose of life is love. And I agree with that. But as long as that's poetry and not science, it stays in the margins. Some people pick that up and make it their life, and they generally live good lives and are happy, rich or poor, doesn't matter. They let go of control, power, force. And you can let go of control, power, force, whether you're rich or poor. It's not the economics, it's not the key. The key is understanding how reality works, why it works that way. And if you do that, then that science, that logic will tell you what the purpose of life is and how you can go about implementing that purpose, how you
Tell
can go
us a
about
little bit
evolving
about,
that purpose.
of course, tell us a little bit about how your experiments will do this.
Well, I have some physics experiments, and I've published a set of experiments, not all of them, but a pretty good set of them, in a physics journal. It's peer reviewed, and they're good physics experiments. And we tried to do the first one that I wanted to do, and found out that the experimentalists didn't actually have the ability to do that experiment. So we did what we could do, and that indeed kind of showed that my take on quantum physics was correct. So that was good. We haven't followed that up. We've got a whole lot of irons in the fire one time here, so we haven't done that. But we're going to do more of those. But they are going to be very expensive, is the problem. We need a lot more resources before we can do these. The one we did was a pretty basic quantum physics experiment. Of course, it did put us on the map, myself and Cusack, and the people that worked, David Chartrand with me, put us on the map as far as serious physics. Doing any kind of quantum physics experiments puts you on the map of serious physics. It's not easily done. The theory is pretty straightforward, but the actually doing it in the lab is a very difficult thing. Well, we did it, and we got the results that were expected, and that was good. So we've kind of proven ourselves as being able to do quantum physics experiments. And we're serious researchers. We did some serious physics there. So that's good. Now, if we can get to the point that the experimentalists can actually do these experiments, then we're going to show that reality is not stuff. It's not matter. We're going to show that it's information, and that it is a virtual reality. It's going to produce evidence that this is a virtual reality computed within consciousness. Consciousness is an information system. Consciousness is about input, processing, memory, and output. Well, that sounds like a computer. Well, that's what consciousness is. It takes an input with sensors, it thinks about it, it compares it to other memories, it makes an output. It does something about what its input told them. So that's the way consciousness works. Consciousness is simply an awareness with a choice. A very simple definition of consciousness. So understanding your reality, where did it come from? Why is C a constant? Why is quantum physics the way it is? I understand all those things now. I didn't when I started this, but I do. I've been able to derive those logically with a whole host of other things. A lot of the paradoxes in science, paradoxes in philosophy, paradoxes even in theology, all fall out as logical, scientific answers. So if you understand that, then, and if you follow that, then your ethic changes. You realize materialism is not the nature of this reality. Control, power, force is dysfunctional. It's not the way that you can live. It's unstable. It will build itself up and then it'll tear itself down. It always has. Our civilizations, they rise and they fall. It will put together something that seems strong and will last forever, but it doesn't, because the seeds of self-destruction are sown in with the ethic that controls the action, controls how people think and how they believe. So just understanding the science will answer those big picture questions. It will explain Plato's analogy in the cave, about what is that other thing that's really the real world, not the shadow on the wall, but the thing behind the shadow on the wall. That's where you can go. Okay, that's known now. It's been developed. It's very logical. It's not any sort of it's not a philosophical thing. It's a logical thing, a scientific thing. And so these experiments are going to help bring the scientists along, so that when the scientists come along, when they see it and they agree to it and they accept it as the next big paradigm shift in science, then we will go into the mainstream. So it's important to show them in terms of physics experiments, because that's what is believable. That defines truth in science. So that's what we're doing. And we're doing a lot of other things. I would encourage all the listeners to go to CUSAC.org, and that's all you have to put in there is CUSAC, CUSAC.org, and look at all the things that we've got going. It's a wonderful selection of opportunities for you to get involved if you're interested in any of these things, or to volunteer or whatever. So a lot's going on, and we hope that within the next couple of decades we will make a big dent in that materialistic philosophy of control, power, force, instead of that being the fundamental ethic that drives our choices and decisions, that creates our fear and creates a very dysfunctional society. That will change. And within 2 or 3 decades, maybe we'll find a kinder, gentler reality to live in. Now, it's going to take that long, because any major paradigm shift takes time. It's not a fast thing. It's going to take some time. And to change a lot of minds about the nature of reality, that's going to take some time too. But then all major paradigm shifts were like that. The big shifts that we went through was the Earth was not the center of the universe. It wasn't even the center of the solar system. The Earth is not flat, it's round. And these were paradigm shifts that once people understood it, it changed everything. It helped us create the technology we have now that's causing us a problem. Yes. But it also provides a solution, because not only can we use that internet to sow disinformation, but we can sow this information about a better, kinder, gentler world, not as a philosophy to buy into, but as a science to understand.
That's wonderful. So many brilliant minds have alluded to the fact of that this reality isn't the fundamental reality. You have often spoke of Edward Fredkin, whose concept of other alludes to that this is not the fundamental reality. Bohm and Einstein, knowing that consciousness was an element, but they didn't know how at that time that fit into things. Many things like that. So all the best with your physics experiments. I know that's going to be an exciting journey for you, and I thank you for engaging in this conversation on communication.
Thank you, Donna. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Love is the answer. If there's one way to discover this truth that Tom Campbell, physicist and consciousness expert, has concluded, it is through your own experience. Give yourself the gift of experiencing yourself. After all, Tom has stated so many times that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. So learn to experience with Tom's Exploring Consciousness and Everything Paranormal program and unlock those natural abilities for yourself. Discover why love is the answer. Binaural beats included to assist you. Details are in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.